Hey guys, it's Simpson2142 here, bringing you another video from the ELO hell in Overwatch, and today we're going to be talking about the attack Symmetra, and more specifically the attack Symmetra on 2CP maps. Now, even the most Symmetra hating of players will accept that she can find use when defending a 2CP map, especially on the first point, as her turrets are great for setting up around those tight little choke points to pick off unsuspecting enemies, and of course you can build up your teleporter to get your better meta heroes in your team back to the fight so they can carry you to victory. However, what is not so fondly seen is an attack Symmetra attacking the first point on 2CP and even the second point on 2CP. But what if I told you that Symmetra on 2CP is actually an incredibly effective tactic? Let me explain. Okay, so 2CP, as we know, with the first point there is often a tight little choke that the most of your team will have to be forced through, as well as the enemy team primarily defending. Symmetra with her right click orbs absolutely thrives on this. Firing your orb into that tight little choke, you are almost guaranteed to hit 2 or even 3 enemies a pop, giving you fantastically fast ult charge, especially if the enemy team are running a barrier setup such as a Reinhardt or an Orisa. So firing your orbs into this will not only get you incredibly fast ult charge, but it may even get you a lucky pick for your team to then push through. Now, generally with Symmetra on 2CP, this first point I will tend to play quite passively, just sort of standing back, right clicking those orbs through until I have enough charge to get a TP or a shield generator. If your team is quite pushy and they manage to get a couple of picks, by all means you can go ahead and support them in the fight, but generally at this point of the game I would hang back to the back lines just so you can get your ult charged. Now, with 2CP, once you have your ultimate charge, it's the debate of whether to use the shield generator or the TP. Now again, this is no clear black and white answer, it all depends what comp your team's running, what comp the enemy is running, and how your team is playing. So just to try and simplify it, if you have quite a divey team with lots of squishies such as a Genji and a Tracer, I would probably recommend putting a shield generator down, as giving them that 75 extra health pool advantage will keep them on the point for longer and help you contest the point and eventually take it. It's also a fact as well that TP isn't quite so useful on the first point, as TP is mainly there to give you spawn advantage, but when you're attacking on 2CP at the first point, your team will have spawn advantage anyway. The only time I would really recommend putting TP on is if your team is quite hyper aggressive, they're already on the point and the enemy has a stack of ults built up. Having a TP on hand will let the enemy team burn all of their ults and give you almost instant respawn advantage, so you can quickly come in and then clear up what's left of the enemy once they've exhausted their ults and abilities. Symmetra also works fantastically at once you've taken the point, being able to set up turrets on the point or setting up turrets where you think the enemy will come through to try and defend it, catching them off guard, giving your team extra damage boost, and then just basically picking them off one by one as they slowly trickle in. Also, in a more passively aggressive sense, her turrets are fantastic should you have hyper aggressive divers on the enemy team coming towards your attack. For example, on Hanamura, it's not uncommon to see an aggressive Genji or Tracer come through the wooden gates to try and get some ult charge on your front line. Having those turrets there will catch them completely off guard, slow down their movement speed, and help your team get a quick pick before doing a push themselves. These kind of strategies will also work very well on hybrid maps, King's Row, and what's the other one, let me think, and Hollywood. Now of course, once you've taken the first point, there's then the matter of the second point. I'm going to be completely honest here, Symmetra doesn't have quite the big usefulness as she does for the first point, but that doesn't mean she can't be useful at all as long as you're playing her right. Again, you're going to have to make the decision of once you get your ult charge, so play passive again. You may even have your ult charge immediately depending on how well your team played. If you put a shield gen down after taking the first point, you'll have instant ultimate again. If you use teleport and your team used a lot of them, you'll be back down to like 0 or little charge. So if that's the case, once again play passively with your right click, just firing onto the point. You'll pick off 2 or 3 enemies and you'll have your charge relatively quick. Once you have this, you've then got to decide, do I want a shield gen, do I want to TP? Now TP actually comes a bit more useful at this stage because you now have the respawn disadvantage. And again, this will all depend on how your team's playing. If your team is quite a squishy dive comp, I would recommend giving the shield gen, as again, it will give your squishy heroes like Tracer and Genji far more survivability to stay on the point rather than have them die and quickly respawn. Because even though you will have a quick spawn with a TP on site, you are generally going to be matching the enemy, so unless you can more than match them off 1-to-1, there is very little point in having a TP. You will only have 6 charges, the enemy will have unlimited until the match is over. However, saying that, if you've got quite a bulky tank composition, where moving to the point could be incredibly slow and stalling it will be incredibly beneficial, then I think you should go for TP. Having a shield gen for a tank setup is relatively useless. After all, a 600 health diva with an extra 75 shield health isn't really going to make too much of a difference. It's not really going to stall the point much, so you're far more better having that quick respawn advantage with a TP than you are a shield gen. Now again, depending on how your team is playing will factor in as to whether you want a shield gen or a teleport. Because with a teleport you've got to place it far more closer to the enemy's front line than with a shield gen, as the shield gen has a 50-meter radius, but a TP, unless it's right near the point, is not going to see much advantage or potential at all. So again, this will base on how aggressive your team's pushing. If they're doing a really aggressive push that you can just sort of slip in the back line, put a TP down, put a bunch of sentries around to give it short-term defense. You don't have to worry about long-term because hopefully your team will be constantly flowing through and they'll naturally be defending it as they come in. If your team is not very aggressive and they're sort of dying one by one, I think it will be better to go for a shield gen. As if you do try and put a hyper-aggressive teleport, it's either going to die instantly as you're going to be the only one there, and no doubt you'll probably die along with it. So waste of an ult, waste of time, and you're just feeding enemy ult charge. And so once your team is pushing onto the second control point, same as you did with the first point, try and turret up areas on the point or areas that they're going to be entering the point to try and catch enemies off guard and to get a few sneaky kills. Other than that, it's just basically hold down left click, try and get maximum charge and hopefully kill the enemy team. This is actually a surprisingly effective tactic, but as you would quite naturally expect, people aren't quite so warm to it. Now, I've had it many times where I've tried to justify to my team how it's going to work, why it's going to work, and even show my win rate. When I've got a 70% win rate on Symmetra, they will still refuse to believe that it's a legitimate tactic and then threaten to go AFK, throw the game, or troll pick unless I switch off her. So this is not an easy tactic to pull off, not because Symmetra sucks, but just because the people around you suck and they're very close-minded and meta-focused in their head. If that's the case, I would just recommend not taking Symmetra, as the match will be lost anyway because of your team throwing the game for you rather than you having the opportunity to throw the game yourself. If people do question you and wonder what the hell you think you're doing, do just try and explain what this guide has. Tell them how you can get fast ult charge through the choke point, tell them how you can help with a shield generator to support the diving DPS characters, and tell them as well how you may even be able to get a hyper aggressive teleport to clutch that spawn advantage that the enemy normally have on 2CP. Like I said, it's not something that's going to be easy to convince your teammates, so I'd recommend practicing this in quick play first, and then trying it out in competitive. And if you can get a team that's fully behind you, this is a really effective strategy, and I do highly recommend it in play. Anyway guys, that's it for this quick guide. My name's been Simpson2142, your Attack Symmetra player. I will release similar guides in the future for King of the Hill, hybrid maps and payload maps, so stay tuned for that. But until the next one guys, take care.